Comic Boom.
Hey guys, Comic Boom here to review a comic book called Artemis and the Assassin. This is a great comic book written by Stephanie Phillips and beautifully illustrated by Megan Hetrick and Francesca Fantini. And this comic book has to do with time travel, and it has to do with espionage, and it has to do, I am happy to report, with identifying a well-known hero in our own world that existed during World War II that hasn't been given enough love, and that woman goes by the name of Virginia Hall. Virginia Hall was born in 1906, and she eventually became one of the best female spies in all of Europe, battling alongside the Allies during World War II. She was after the war, she was the first female civilian to ever receive the Distinguished Service Cross from the United States. She also received medals from France and Britain. And on the 100th anniversary of her birthday in 2006, the British and French ambassadors came to the United States to honor her. And yet, how many people have actually heard of Virginia Hall? Well, let me tell you guys, Virginia Hall was a very, very good as an intelligence operative against the Nazis. She operated mostly in France during the 1940 to approximately 1944. And she reported back on German troop movements, and she this woman could actually build a radio out of bike parts and spare wires. I mean, she was very intelligent. She had an extraordinary life, and it's so wonderful that a comic creator has come along, Stephanie Phillips, and she's taken this extraordinary woman that has existed in our own world and crafted this wonderful story of time travel around her. And this is a comic book that it will encourage you. This first issue encouraged me to actually look up Virginia Hall. And I found out something that I did not know, and that is Daisy Ridley. That's right, that Daisy Ridley, I almost said diddly there, Daisy Ridley from Star Wars fame, she is actually going to be playing Virginia Hall in a movie that will likely go into production well after this whole pandemic thing ends. There's actually another movie that's already in post-production dealing with Virginia Hall's life. But that's somewhat of a digression, but I wanted to talk about it because it's wonderful when comic creators really exploit their creative juices and build upon the heroism of our own lives and in our own history and craft a comic book around it. I just think that's pretty cool. Now, Artemis and the Assassin, what it's about is that Artemis herself, Artemis is the nickname that they gave Virginia Hall during World War II. The Nazis called her Artemis. She had the nickname Artemis. She was the limping lady. She actually had her left knee was actually, Virginia Hall accidentally, when she was 27 years old in 1932, she accidentally shot off her own foot. Everything below her left knee, she accidentally shot off. It had to be amputated because of an accident that happened while she was bird hunting with friends in 1932. Crazy. But despite her disability, she had dreams of working for the State Department. The State Department wouldn't hire her, despite the fact that at that time even the President of the United States had a disability, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And so because she couldn't get into the State Department, she couldn't become a diplomat, which was one of her dreams. She volunteered to be an ambulance driver during World War II when the Nazis were invading France. And it was in her experience as an ambulance driver that she runs into a number of individuals who were impressed by what they saw, and eventually she ends up working for the SOE, which was the British equivalent. It was a special operative envoy, and then there was the OSS, which would later that was the forerunner of the CIA. She ended up having quite an extraordinary adventure, and she worked all the way into the 1950s, eventually fighting communism, the formation of communism or the spread of communism throughout Europe. Extraordinary life for Virginia Hall. And what's great about this is Virginia Hall is actually one of the targets of the assassin. It's called Artemis and the Assassin. Again, Artemis is Virginia Hall's code name that the Nazis gave her. She also went by the limping, the limping woman, the woman with the limp. In any event, the assassin here is a time-traveling assassin. And this series opens up with this time-traveling assassin by the name of Maya killing Rasputin. in 1917 Russia, and she goes on various assignments, and she's got to assassinate and kill various key figures that have significant impacts on history. And it's essentially established that Virginia Hall had an impact on history because the role she played in blowing up bridges to prevent German troop movements in occupied France are well known. The intelligence that she gave the Allies played a significant role in a lot of their victories over the Nazis at key times leading up to the invasion on D-Day in 1944. And what I love about this is not only do we get to learn something about the assassin Maya, who was sent back to essentially assassinate Virginia Hall, but we learn something about Virginia Hall herself. And it's illustrated in here that she does in fact have a prosthesis. And it was interesting that she actually, it's not indicated here in the first issue, but I know from history, because I've done a lot of readings now on Virginia Hall. Virginia Hall actually had a code name for her prosthesis, her wooden leg. She called her wooden leg Cuthbert. She called her wooden leg Cuthbert, and it was quite comical. At one time when she was fleeing, she had to leave France when the Nazis were closing in on her. She actually fled France through the Pyrenees Mountains. So here is this woman trying to flee France through the Pyrenees Mountains, 7,500 feet high, in snowy November, and she's literally doing her best to radio back and let the Allies know where she is. And at one point, she even complains about Cuthbert, and her own Allied friends didn't realize that they didn't know who Cuthbert was. They didn't realize that Cuthbert was her wooden leg, was the name she gave her wooden leg. And they basically radio back to her at one point and said, if Cuthbert's slowing you down, eliminate him. There's so much interesting history on this Virginia Hall, and such a perfect choice of a protagonist in this series. And I listened to a podcast interview on John Cetrus's Word Balloon, where he interviews Stephanie Phillips, and she talks about how heroic Virginia Hall was and how extraordinary a life she really had. And she hints at some of the things that are coming up in this series. And what's great about it is this assassin, this named Maya, has her own issues. And she's a ruthless assassin. And there's a suggestion here that Maya herself was a person that was plucked out of time around the time of a great flood. And I'm wondering if that's the great flood of Noah's Ark, but I guess that's just me speculating. But in any event, this person, this Maya, who is trained to be this assassin, is sent at various points in history to take people out, and for some nefarious agenda or for some other agenda that we don't know yet. That's only the first issue. But it's really interesting that at some point down the line, I know Stephanie Phillips has indicated that there's a sort of a reluctant partnership that's going to form between Maya and Virginia Hall, who is Artemis. And it's going to be one of those relationships that's very precarious. And it's going to have a lot of tension, because at the end of the day, it is Maya's job to assassinate Virginia Hall, who had a significant impact, arguably, on the outcome of World War II, specifically the location and timing of D-Day. Because remember, the Nazis very much wanted to know. They knew in 1944 that the Allies were going to attack them. They thought they were going to be attacked on the beaches of Calais, but it was actually the beaches of Normandy where I believe beaches of Normandy where they were attacked. But the Nazis didn't know that, and of course, one of the most successful intelligence operations ever was the fact that the Allies managed to actually surprise the Germans on D-Day. And one of the reasons why operatives within France were able to prepare for the Normandy D-Day invasion and do so secretly was because of the efforts of Virginia Hall in spreading that news to various operatives that in a couple weeks the D-Day invasion is going to take place. But just as she's told that information from an operative in this comic, one of her friends, who goes by the name of Hamlet, gets killed by Maya, who's there to assassinate Virginia. And that's how it basically ends. And then it carries on into showing some past shows us the history of how Maya became an assassin. And this really whets the appetite. I love this. I'm a student of history. I love history, and I love how Stephanie Phillips here has really taken that concept and has really went with it, and especially on a real world hero like Virginia Hall that not enough people are talking about. And there's at least one Hollywood movie that's going to be coming out on Virginia Hall, and of course probably another one of which Daisy Ridley has already been cast for an American version of that character. So, of that real life hero. Wow. Just plain wow, extraordinary. And it's worth noting in real life, Virginia Hall never liked attention. She retired in 1966 at the mandatory retirement age of 60. Otherwise, she would have likely kept working for the CIA. And she went back to her farm in outside Baltimore, and eventually died in 1982 in relative obscurity. She never did any interviews. She never wanted to talk about the war years. She had no interest in having any sort of publicity. It was only after she died that really people became curious about her life, and of course it became paramount. In the last 10 years, there's been a handful. There's been like 8 or 10 books written about Virginia Hall, an extraordinary woman, and again, the first civilian female in World War II to have received that Distinguished Service Medal. Incredible, and honored by France and Britain, and got the equivalent of service distinguished medals from France and Britain as well. Extraordinary woman, and we got a comic book written about her now. Now, of course, this is fictional, but what I really like about this type of comic book is that in real life there were pockets of time when she came back at the end of World War II in her real world history. There were pockets of time in Virginia Hall's life where there were gaps where she came back after she retired. What did she do after that? Also, what's extraordinary is that much of her activities in World War II and post-World War II are still classified. So most of the missions that Virginia Hall performed for the United States CIA, they're still secret. They're still classified, so people still don't really know everything that she did. That to me just is cool. So I like that Stephanie Phillips has taken that character, that real world character, and saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if maybe she became a time traveler? And there was a time traveling assassin that tried to take her out, right? I mean, this is good stuff. This is what comic books are about. This is good stuff, people. Guys, you want to pick up Artemis and the Assassin here. I promise me you're not going to be disappointed with this first issue because, if you're disappointed, you're going to be disappointed because there's not more of it. I wish the second, third, and fourth issue could come out. I wish this damn pandemic would be over so we could enjoy this issue because I'm really enjoying it. And it's going to encourage you to just Google Virginia Hall, read her Wikipedia, read excerpts from her books. I mean, she was a good-looking woman. She was knowledgeable she knew 5 different languages. She spoke 5 different languages, for God's sakes. She was the top of her class. She was athletic, and that was, and then think of all she accomplished. And she had a wooden leg, for God's sakes. Good grief. I mean, this woman was just nothing short of incredible. And the only reason that she never became a member of the State Department was, again, because of some obscure rule about people with disabilities. And, of course, she was a woman. That played a role in it as well. Because let me tell you guys, when you read this, you might be tempted to think that this maybe is just another comic whether it's another Mary Sue, where they're exaggerating the abilities of a woman just because. Nonsense. Read about the real life of Virginia Hall and you realize that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, of course, in real life, I doubt she had some time traveling experiences, but it's easy to imagine she did because she was that extraordinary woman in real life. And Maya, I have a feeling Maya, the time traveling assassin, is going to have a lot she can learn from the real life Virginia Hall. Guys, you want to check out Artemis and the Assassins. You'll have a great time. And check it out, please, especially in these pandemic times. You got nothing better to do. Check it out. And there's also I'm going to leave some links below. There's a couple of news broadcasts on Virginia Hall, her life, and then check out Artemis and the Assassin. I also want to give a couple of shout outs to the art here. and I'll show some art throughout this. Megan Hetrick and Francesca Fantini. The art here was pretty good. I think it conveys the action very well. I think it shows it gives you enough. It teases you that it really makes me wonder what is coming up. How are they going to play this? The assassin in particular, Maya, when she you get the impression that maybe she had some rather traumatic experiences in her training as an assassin, undoubtedly having to go back in time and kill certain people, even people that might involve innocent people, might even involve killing children. I mean, it's one thing to go back and kill Hitler when he was a kid, but you still got to walk up to a kid and kill the kid, even if that kid was Hitler. It still might be hard to do if you've never done it before. I'm not saying she's done that, but I'm just imagining what that must be like to be a time-traveling assassin and you're giving an assignment that you don't really like. How do you shut off your emotions and be able to do that? And how does Maya, when she comes, or Maya, however you say her name, when she comes across somebody like Virginia Hall, who's got a rich history of her own, being born on a farm in outside Baltimore, Maryland, and all her rich history. I wonder how these two are going to mingle with each other, and I'm really curious to see how writer Stephanie Phillips puts those two together and interacts them together as this series continues. This is a 6-issue series. It's going to have, the first arc is going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's what Stephanie Phillips has stated in a podcast I listened to, John Citrus at Word Balloon. I'll leave the link to that below as well. And she's hoping to maybe get a couple of other arcs under her belt as well. She does have other stories planned. Anyways, I'm in this for the long haul, and it might be a little longer haul than I realized because of what we have here with this damn pandemic, but let's check it out. So guys, until next time, check out Artemis and the Assassin. Follow me on Twitter at Metropolis40. Hit the subscribe button, and until next time, Comic Boom out.